Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this lecture. My name is Stephen Rost. I'm a professor at Lawrence Technological University in Southfield, Michigan. We also have a campus downtown Detroit at the Detroit Center for Design and Technology, and I'll be teaching there this next fall. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Harold Linton for inviting me to lecture. I've had an interesting time gathering materials and preparing for this. And I must say that this is one of the strangest and challenging structures of a presentation I've ever had to make. The challenge is not being face to face with my audience. I'm a person who likes to look into people's eyes and get a sense of how they're reading my words and my images. I'm just going to have to assume that you're there enjoying what I'm having to say, and you'll have an opportunity at the end to ask questions in the format that Professor Linton is set up for you. My second most challenging presentation was just a year ago. I was in China at Sichuan University in Chengdu, and I had an interpreter, and we met several times to go over the lectures I was giving, and there was some real interesting issues of translation. But in the end, it was a great experience for me and for the translator, who said she really appreciated learning about some of the syntax language differences and learning about my artwork. So this evening, the talk is titled Channeling the Flaneur and Other Stories. And the structure may be reminiscent of that title. In other words, you may get a sense that I am wandering through different topics. And the way I have it structured is I'm going to present myself, give you an idea of where I came from, why my interests changed, what led me from one career path to another, and then I'll move into my artwork. Then after that, I've recorded a presentation I've made called Sense of City. And that is a project that is more poetic, at least people have told me that, and it is, I consider it somewhat of a performance piece as I jump from idea to idea. And then I've also prepared a couple of bodies of work that I've printed and presented but never lectured on. And I'll talk over some of the images, but basically I will allow them to be shown. And one of the bodies of work are called The Sense of Place. And it's work that I created while I was in China a couple of years ago, invited to work at a workshop in a small village in the mountains. And I'll speak to that later. And then the second body of work are portraits that I created while I was in India in my last sabbatical around 6 years ago. So after that, I'll have some concluding remarks, and then you'll have an opportunity to email me questions through the process that Professor Linton has set up for you. So with that in mind, I wish I could be there with you, but I am, in a way. I'm probably sitting in front of my laptop watching myself on this, September evening. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and look forward to hearing from you. Hello again. So if you remember, the title of this talk is Channeling the Flaneur and other stories. Well, this is the other stories. But you might find when we get to the end of this particular story that it is reminiscent of the wandering through life story. I don't know who my audience is out there. Again, I wish I had this chance to be face to face. But some of you will be able to relate to these life decisions that you've had to make, changes of paths, changes of directions. And others, this may be a way to relate to some things you're working through right now. And we'll see where it goes. So this is a project that was fun to put together. I feel like there's a certain energy in this first slide that it's type of free falling. It's a lot of movement, not getting very far, but still moving forward. There is, in most of the things that we do, there is a risk, and with risk, we hope there's a reward. There's a bit of free falling that I've gone through. At the same time, I feel like I'm floating through life in a way that is unreal. So there's a bit of a contradiction in this particular slide that I think speaks to some of the decisions I've had to make and experiences I've had. And I'm going to go back to an experience that I had in high school where I was called into the guidance counselors or the career counselor. I think they were one and the same. My senior year, as I was thinking about what universities to apply to. And he says, "So what do you want to do with your life?" And I thought about it and I said, "I want to have fun." Well, at that point, he dismissed me and said, "Come back when you have a decision." Well, I was good at math, I was good at science, but I didn't want to be a straight up engineer. So I found a university that allowed me to do both business and engineering. And so I got through Calculus 2 into Calculus 3, took my physics courses, took my intro to business courses and economics, et cetera, and decided engineering was not my forte, and I became just a single major. I was majoring in business, specifically marketing research. So there was still an analytical aspect to it, but a human quality to it as well. Well, upon graduating, I, with my Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration, back in 1975, I was struggling to find some meaningful employment. I did, after a year, got a job as a sales engineer. So this brought both the engineering and business aspects together. And what you're looking at now are examples of places I've visited and my clients, oil refineries, petrochemical plants, shipbuilders, and the things I was selling, designing were diesel engines, which you'll see down in the lower left-hand corner, 20,000 horsepower to be put in place in these ships that you see a section of. For the oil refineries and petrochemical plants, compressors, turbines, gearing systems, multi-million dollar pieces of equipment. I also had the sort of the daunting opportunities of being in power plants, and specifically what stands out in my memory are nuclear power plants, which you see on the right-hand side.
Um, cooling pumps was, I believe, and backup, again, the 20,000 horsepower diesel engine backup power units. Um, Also working with the Navy and providing condenser units, titanium condensing units for these nuclear Trident submarines. But after a year and a half of that experience, it, it was something that I found was not satisfying for me, though I was well paid. I had an expense account, company car. I felt I needed to make a decision for myself and decided to leave that job. I quit. It wasn't enough to be making a lot of money. So I found this opportunity to work in a bicycle shop. It was one of my passions, something I'd been doing all of my life. But at the same time, when I was in Colorado in university, it was something that I found really gratifying. And so this was my chance to do something that I really loved. I didn't make very much money. It was a very labor-intensive job. I became a bicycle mechanic under the tutelage of a much younger guy than I was, but he understood the zen of bicycle maintenance. The owner of this shop had the idea of opening a second shop, and knowing that I had a degree in business, offered me the opportunity to be the manager of that. Well, life happened. He got a divorce. He didn't have the money to invest in a second shop, and so that opportunity fell through. And I decided to leave this job as well. And I thought, well, I might be interested in going back to school. And I had a hobby of photography that I developed, no pun intended, at university in Denver, but also had an interest in drawing. So I moved to Minneapolis with one of my old college roommates, and applied to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. So I put my life on hold again and studied. I was accepted into the program and as a graphic design major. I took a filmmaking class and thought, oh, this is really interesting. I can combine the two, graphic design and filmmaking. Now, this was 1979. And then took a photography class and thought, oh, all three of these things make sense. So I became a triple major. And I would advise any student out there not to do that. And well, while at Minneapolis, just the way the loan structure was set up by the government, I can only borrow a certain amount of money for undergrad. But if I went to graduate school, I could double my debt. So after a year and a half of being in the college, I put together a portfolio and started to apply to graduate schools. And that's a whole nother story, which I'll spare you details, but suffice it to say, I chose Cranbrook Academy of Art. And the reason I chose that school was, one, it was recommended to me by my undergraduate instructors at Minneapolis College of Art and Design. But more important, it was because they allowed me to pursue my interests in both graphic design and photography. So I had a studio on the second floor for graphic design and studied with Kathy and Michael McCoy. And the example on the right-hand side is a poster that Kathy and I collaborated on. That's my photography and her design work. And photography, I studied photography with Carl Toth. It was an amazing 2-year experience, and have no regrets at all choosing that particular school for grad school. And that brought me to the Detroit area, where I still live. But while in school, my second year at Cranbrook, I got an offer to teach part-time at a school for gifted, high schools for gifted kids called Roper School. And so at that point, I accepted it and needed to drop one of the studios, though. So I dropped my design studio, but continued to collaborate with my colleagues in the graphic design program. And I kept my photography studio and studied with, and eventually got my degree in photography, my MFA in photography. Roper School then, after I graduated, offered me a full-time position. If anybody knows about small private schools, the pay scale is pretty nominal, but it was extremely gratifying to work with very smart kids, especially right out of graduate school. Halfway through that experience, a couple years later, I was offered the opportunity to teach part-time at Lawrence Technological University. Back then it was called Lawrence Institute of Technology. And so I took that position part-time, and after a couple of years, I was offered a full-time position. Oddly enough, it was half the number of teaching hours and twice the pay. So I took that opportunity and ran with it. And I'm still here today. So 37 and a half years later, I've continued to go through, starting as a adjunct faculty member and then assistant professor. I'm a full professor right now, and had the opportunity to have a couple of sabbaticals, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. I accomplished quite a bit while at Lawrence Tech. I was part of a team that started the art and design department, which I most recently was the department chair for. And we got accredited by NASAD, which was an incredible accomplishment. And we've gone through several renewals of that accreditation. I've been in leadership roles besides department chairs. I was faculty council chair, faculty senate chair, mentor to many faculty. So it's been quite the circuitous route to where I am today. Never dreamed I would be a teacher. Never thought of myself as an artist when I was in high school. But this has led me to the artwork that I'm going to show you. And I'm going to start with I guess the last work I did while I was at Cranbrook, so my thesis exhibit. And I'm starting with this because there's an idea that kind of runs through all of my work. So what you're seeing are I then moved on after graduating from Cranbrook and living in a studio space, which you're seeing right now, that I use as the subject matter in this particular series in downtown Pontiac. I started to use this method of slide projections and recapturing those images, but instead of projecting them back into the space, I was building still lifes and then projecting onto those. You can see maybe a bit of tension in these individual images. This was not the most pleasant living experience that I've ever had. And so I was trying to express that with this series. And my wife, who's also an artist, also a Cranbrook graduate, and I decided to move out of this particular building, and we bought a house. Things got a little better, or a lot better. So these images that you're seeing now are those from the interior of my house, where I was projecting the images back into the space, collecting, collapsing space, thinking about more of a spatial experience. Again, these are actually some of them are quite large, meaning the one on the right is I think 36 inches by 36 inches. Well, I started to then work at the Lawrence Institute of Technology in the School of Architecture. This was prior to any art and design program. And so architecture became the topic of my research. And I began to build these images. They're diptychs that I joined together with graphic elements. So construction sites, using ladders as my motif. You can consider any metaphor that you'd like that's embedded in them. But if you can see that the two images are like the overlapping of the graphic element is bonding the two together. Well, I continued with my interest in landscape and architecture and diptychs, and created this next series of works. And was very interested in movement through space. So I just returned from a trip to Europe. And so these lower images of moving through space are from a variety of places, churches, archaeological sites, piazzas. And then the upper images are of objects that you might walk on, that would have a sense of maybe sound to them, or a different feeling, physical feeling. And so trying to, the two images that are joined together is, I think, quite interesting, but it's not so much about the discrete images, but about that space. There is no space, but that edge that connects the two as to what it makes you think of. So it's that combination, and we'll see that again in another series. So the largest these were printed were 60 inches by 40 inches for an exhibit in Shanghai, China. So they became very engaging, and they were hung very close to the floor. The next series of images are, again, diptychs, and very much about the relationship between the two. And then as you read these two and you think about them, you know, what thoughts come to your mind. So you've got the hard surface of the sculptures on the left that are cloth, and then you have the soft images on the right, which are flowers, but and different plants. And then, what are the relationships between the two? What does it add up to? Hopefully 1 + 1 is much greater than 2. And these were printed 48 inches wide by approximately 15 inches tall. Well, as I mentioned, I have an interest in architecture, and and I had this, and I don't know, I guess an interest in sculpture. So I got back from a trip to Italy, and I had this opportunity to do a one-person show installation at a college here in Michigan. And so this is an installation I did that is reminiscent of a space that I remembered while in Italy. So I fabricated these columns that have 2 spirals, one within the other. Spirals infer infinity. There's no inside, there's no outside. It doesn't define a space. I created like a checkerboard, a movement through space type of scene that, and I don't know if you can see it in this slide, but that's sod in there. And then that image in the background is of a sandy floor. I reused those images of actually, I think this was the first use of these images that are against the wall, that are these blurry images of movement. And in between those are these very large 40 by 60 inch prints of very stagnant objects, yet they are deteriorating. And you can walk behind it. You're actually supposed to walk behind those. And even though they are materials, they're images of materials that are very strong and sturdy and deteriorating, they're on paper and they tend to float in space. Hence, that's how I fabricated the hanging devices. And then trying to get the impression that these images were very temporal. I chose not to put them in frames, but to build these, what I call shelves, and held the photographs in the little pocket between the rods and the walls by bending these rods so that they were somewhat diagrammatical, but also functional. And this is a photograph of my assistant for scale. So at least you have an idea of how large these are. Did another installation using the columns again, a collaboration with my wife, Andrea Ice. And this was I did this a very site-specific project. This was for a gallery in Detroit at the College for Creative Studies. And the overall theme of this exhibit had to do with the city. So I created this city grid. We're only seeing a portion of this. This is only half. If you're familiar with Detroit, it's axial, and it's so this space in the lower left-hand corner is one of the axes. The columns have photographs of that are rolled up of industrial sites. And the rusting of the material is also reminiscent of that. And then Andrea had these fabric pieces with photographs printed on them of Greek busts, fragments of Greek busts. So another body of work that incorporated photographs and the sculptural or three-dimensional elements to it was for an exhibit at another college here in Dearborn, Michigan. And these are 24 by 36 inches, and you can see that these are photographs of re-rod. So it's they were tearing down bridges over a highway. And then I created these sort of bed of nails to pinch these together. The image is of I-beams that were from a building that caught fire and bent. The reference to the urban environment is this grid system that's vertical, and then the spiral of something of this galvanized steel that I fabricated, and the photograph is just resting comfortably on it. This ring is about 48 inches in diameter. There's a photograph that is held in place by gauze, and then that is all held in place by these slats and leaning against the wall. The image itself is of an office building that had caught fire in Detroit. And I'm just trying to capture it and hold it in place. So one of the other interests of mine was, well, along with the sort of the urban grid, is communication. And this is an installation I did for a project that we hosted at our university. And it's a little difficult to see, but the center photograph is the 40 by 60 inch photograph being held in place by these ropes. And then to the right, the ropes disappear into these mailboxes. And to the left, it's disappearing into a closet. Also had the opportunity to work with schools in Detroit as visiting artists, and this is a sculpture that still stands today. It's not as shiny as it was back when I made these photographs, but it's in Clark Park, which is in southwest Detroit. It's the entry to a sculpture park that I was a team member of. This is the gateway. These are vertical pathways that sort of describe going from adolescence to adult life. And there's designs on both sides. So it's really 4 sculptures in one. And it stands about 12 feet tall. So the scale of these, and you wouldn't know from these photographs, because I think these were study prints. But the size of these are 48 inches by 48 inches. These are individual photographs that are approximately 60 by 40. Another installation that I did in an office building in downtown Detroit, which is now called the Dime Building. So I fabricated these objects, these boats, I call them, out of steel. And it's really about travel. And I've been doing a significant amount of travel. And I'll let you I'll let you interpret what you see. But ladders became an important part of the theme again. This is the image in the back of the room, and you can see in the lower right-hand corner of this is an arm. This is from a park in Paris. This is a plan view of those boats that I filled with shredded paper. So the buckets against the wall with the ladders drawn on the wall are just tilted slightly towards you to suggest that there's something that you want to see in there. The ladders are an illusion because they're just drawings and you can't get to them. And then opposite that wall is our photographs of feet. And then opposite that wall is our photographs of the feet of sculptures and the edge of the pedestals holding that sculpture. And the toes are beat up. Actually, the beauty of those images are those points of where the sculpture and the pedestal meet, which I'm sure nobody considers when they look at these. And this is what's again on the opposite side with those pails tilting ever so slightly towards us. So that's the end of this particular other stories, and I'm looking forward to showing you the next body of work.
My work lies somewhere between thinking about the moment and the thinking about the past. Where they collide becomes the point of interest. An image in thought and sight forms a construct that can move beyond the simple and move us forward. Arrive. According to Louis Kahn in his speech delivered to the AIA in Detroit in 1971 on the subject, the room, the street, and the human agreement, he describes the street as a community room. This room is where distances between places are connected, where the sense of space is contained in the scale of the adjacent rooms. It is where the human agreement is established. Kahn continues, human agreement is a sense of rapport, of commonness, of all bells ringing in unison, not needing to be understood by example, but felt by an undeniable inner demand for a presence. It is an inspiration with the promise of the possibilities. Nothing is experienced by itself, but always in relation to its surroundings. The sequence of events leading up to that, the memory and the past experience. Kevin Lynch. The following images are suggestive of these ideas. The spaces are created within views forcibly organized by the relation of the perspective of the viewer to the rooms that offer a new understanding of space. The poetics of these spaces are the sum of the light that defines these points of view of the observer and the moment. The images connect our senses of place in a moment of observation. I sense threshold, light to silence, silence to light. The ambience inspires. Inspiration wherein the desire to be, to express, crosses with the possible. Louis Kahn. When we close our eyes and picture the most beautiful place in our mind, what surfaces? The answer is frames that are affected by sensory stimuli, connected to a particular time that resolves and clarify the moment. For a brief time, an emotional response is recorded. Zero. Zero is where we begin. You find a point to depart from, and that point is zero. Zero is the start of each and every moment. The trajectory creates the relationship between zero and the infinite number of possibilities towards a destination. Along this line, a path is cut that becomes a demarcation of time. It defines a spatial experience that moves along with you, a shadow of sorts, as you move. These moments are preserved in memory. Start again. Slowly collect these brief moments. String them together through a path of time enhanced by the rhythm and cadence of the heartbeat. They are solid moments that paralyze and fleeting moments from which we find freedom. I want to talk about these moments of in-between. That is, the time when the gap closes to the point of uncertainty. We recognize ourselves in these moments. They define our being, and they are where we look to establish a footing in reality. As the moments pass by, the selection process becomes the important part. A good environmental image gives its possessor an important relationship between himself and the outside world. Kevin Lynch. Moves forward, slow. The sidewalk sets the stage for the dance, a layered, dense, and rhythmic movement through the city. We understand that this dance requires observation. The sidewalk provides the interaction of the strangers. What is needed is the set, the context. How does the observed and the set intersect? The city provides this context. The arbitrary collection of objects are collected by the camera and offer the viewer a refreshed context of the city and its place for the dance. Moving forward, there is a point to the direction of travel. The rhythm of the pace is the cadence of the steps. Your eyes move from side to side while your head leads. Control is relinquished to the density of the environment, people, visual stimuli, and obstacles. Your pace is slow, referring each glance as a record of the pace. It is slow, calm, and as deliberate as the flow of the dance. Fast. The edge is near, forward the only option. Distractions exist only in our mind. The purpose is resolute. The destination is the image. The collision is the speed of thought. Speed matters. Fleeting images filed. The treasury of shadow, lying in that ambience, light to silence, silence to light. Light is the giver of presence, casts its shadow, which belongs to light. What is made belongs to light and to desire. Louis Kahn. More engaged. As you dash up the stairs, moving from one frame of mind to another, you see a shadow cast on the wall. Your thoughts of heading home, cooking, or meeting your lover for a drink quickly slides aside to thinking about a cast of shadow, bits of information about what might lie ahead, outside, above ground. That elusive image only triggers a visual in your mind. Still, you are visually aware of the moment, so not to make a misstep. Perception is not just a matter of biology, psychology, or personal history, but of cultural formation. Marshall McLuhan. Working your way through the city, something crosses your mind. The sun beats down, the sounds are harsh. Thoughts of looking anywhere but forward is deemed wrong, but the sudden change of light forces you to want to look away. Shield your eyes without losing your focus. You look down, but still your mind is focused on looking forward. The crack, the water, the shadow, they all create another picture. The city sidewalk by itself is nothing. It is an abstraction. Jane Jacobs. Depart. In Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities, Marco Polo, speaking to Kubla Khan, remarks, "Memory's words, once they are fixed in the words, are erased. Perhaps I am afraid of losing Venice all at once, if I speak of it. Or perhaps, speaking of another city, I have already lost it, little by little." As the layers of innocence build upon the surfaces of our memories, light can only describe what exists. There is an ambiguity that suggests we see something and feel something else. We see something and feel something else. We want to see these images as everlasting memories that offer the mundane details with a hint of monumental delight. Are we thinking we know what we are seeing? As you can see, the familiar becomes more complex as more layers are contemplated. When you think the familiar becomes fresh, the traveler and the city join forces to build an experience beyond any other. Contrary to what Calvino says, The work of art can recapture the lost and thus save it from destruction, at least in our minds. Thus, art triumphs over the destructive power of time. The walk is long, and you wonder what lies ahead. The familiarity of the neighborhood is comforting. A song rings out from above, and the stride of your steps plays harmony with the unknown origin of the song. No need to look up, for the body and the soul and the place are in unison. What is the city? Consider this for a moment. Anxious city? City of bits? Compact city? Dead city? Edge city? Fantasy city? Kitsch city? Network city? Survival city? Unknown city? The city is a place for discovery, where edges become obscured by light, sound, smell, textures, and purpose. The scale of the city is flexible, overwhelming, and intimate. You retreat within your thoughts, looking for security, but always taking risks, searching. The magnification of the city is the reflection of an intimate experience. Those moments are the summation of the vastness of what the city provides and the intimateness of the traveler's experience. Ultimately, I, as an artist, am trying to figure out who I am, and given the city in the connective tissue that is a product of the human desire to create relationships, provide opportunities for social interaction, and stir the imagination, I am constantly seeking ways to visually explore my relationships, as intimate as it is, within the immensity of the daydream. Remember zero? Zero is where we began. You find a point to depart from, and that point is zero. Zero is the start of each and every moment. The trajectory creates the relationship between zero and the infinite number of possibilities towards a destination, towards an answer. These images are not Eugene Atget's, for Atget was in search of a silence in a complex Paris. This work takes the silent, intimate city and explores its complexities.